Joined the search, missing South Australian boy Gus Lamont says he's certain the 4-year-old is not on the family property.
He's someone who knows that land like the back of his hand, and he's told us that he believes that there's absolutely no way that Gus is on that property, which we haven't heard before. He's also put to bed some of the theories that are being out there in terms of a wedge-tailed eagle, dogs, wild pigs. He says none of that sort of animal is on that property.
It's not going to happen. A wedge-tail will pick up a kilo or two. You know, they're not going to pick up a 4-year-old. There's no pigs, there's no wild dogs, there's no foxes.
So we have just got an update from South Australian Police who say they were there yesterday, actually. They were following up on a lead that a footprint was found about 3.5 kilometres from the homestead near Yunta where he went missing. They thought it might have been from Gus, but now believe that it's not from a child. Now, this isn't to be confused with the other footprint that has been found. This was early in the search. They discovered a footprint about 500 metres from the property just north, and they did and still do believe that that was Gus's. But unfortunately, that didn't provide them with any new.
He was only 4 years old, a little boy with golden curls, a love for toy tractors, and a laugh that echoed through the South Australian Outback. But one warm evening, as the sun dipped behind the red horizon, that laughter went silent. In the time it takes to make a cup of tea, little Gus Lamont was gone. No cry for help, no footprints leading away, no trace at all. What began as a desperate search quickly turned into one of Australia's most confounding mysteries, a case that has divided experts, devastated a family, and left a haunting question hanging in the desert air. Did Gus wander off into the wild, or did someone take him? Tonight we retrace his final known moments, reveal newly surfaced details from the search, and expose the overlooked clue that could change everything. A second footprint, discovered far from where investigators were looking. This is not just a story of a missing boy. It's a story about the power of silence, the persistence of hope, and the truth the earth refuses to give up. Before we dive into this story, remember this is Detective Kate, True Crime, a channel that stands for justice and giving every case the attention it deserves. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our investigations. And don't forget, share your thoughts and theories below. Every clue counts. In the heart of South Australia, it was a quiet Friday afternoon when everything changed. That day, Gus had been playing near the homestead, running between the sheds and his toy trucks while his grandmother prepared dinner. The air was still, the light golden, the kind of peace only the Outback knows. At around 5 o'clock, she stepped outside and called his name. No answer. At first, she thought he was hiding, a playful habit. But as the minutes passed, worry began to grow. By the time the sun touched the horizon, that worry had turned into fear. Within the hour, police were notified. The first patrol arrived before nightfall. Soon, helicopters circled above the vast property. Infrared drones scanned the desert floor, and volunteers began sweeping through the rocky terrain. It was one of the largest search operations the region had seen in years. Then, a possible sign. A footprint found roughly 500 meters from where Gus was last seen. Small, light, pressed faintly into the dust. It was the first and only trace that searchers believed could belong to him. But after analysis, investigators ruled it out, saying it didn't match Gus's shoe or stride. Days later, another volunteer claimed to have found a different print, this one larger, shaped like a boot, near a dry creek bed about 2 kilometers east of the homestead. The discovery was examined, photographed, then quietly set aside. No public explanation followed. If that second footprint was real, it raised a chilling possibility that Gus might not have been alone out there. Someone could have been walking beside him, or following him. Weeks later, when the official search was scaled back, the questions only grew louder. How does a child vanish without a trace in open country? Why was the footprint dismissed so quickly? And why, despite all the technology and effort, has not a single piece of clothing, toy, or evidence been found? To his family, Gus is not a case file. He's a little boy who loved pancakes, toy tractors, and chasing his dog around the yard. To investigators, he remains one of the most puzzling missing child cases in recent Australian history. And to the world watching, his story is a haunting reminder of how silence and sand can hide the truth. The day Gus Lamont disappeared began like any other. Quiet, ordinary, almost peaceful. The Lamont family's sheep station sits deep in the South Australian outback, a place where the air feels still and the horizon stretches endlessly. It's a life defined by distance. The nearest town, Yunta, is nearly an hour away. Out here, you rely on instinct, on routine, on each other. That morning, Gus had breakfast with his grandmother, cereal and a piece of toast with honey. He laughed as the family's sheepdog, Dusty, trotted by the kitchen door. After breakfast, he followed his grandfather outside, helping feed the lambs and playing in the dust with his toy truck. It was a simple day, the kind that blends into all the others, until the late afternoon. By 4:30, the temperature had dropped and the light began to soften. Gus was last seen near the old tin shed, wearing his favorite blue long-sleeve shirt with a yellow minion on the front, light gray pants, a gray hat, and little boots. When his grandmother called him in for dinner, around 5, there was no answer. She tried again, louder. Still nothing. Minutes passed. She walked around the yard, expecting to find him crouched behind a bike or hiding by the water tank. But the yard was empty. His toy truck lay where he'd left it, alone in the dust. At 5:15 p.m., the family began searching the immediate property. They checked the sheds, the creek bed, the small dam. At 5:45, they called the police. By 6, the first patrol vehicles were on their way. As the sun sank behind the red hills, the search began in earnest. Officers marked grids across the property, volunteers combed through the scrub, and a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging scanned the darkening terrain. Drones were launched, tracking heat signatures from above. For the first few hours, everyone believed they would find him, tired, scared, maybe dehydrated, but alive. The terrain was rough, but not impossible. Children had wandered before in this part of the country and been found miles away. But as night fell and temperatures dropped sharply, hope began to slip. Search teams found animal tracks, tire marks, and faint impressions in the sand. One of those impressions, a small footprint, stopped them in their tracks. It seemed to point toward a dry gully to the east. It matched the size of a child's foot, perhaps even Gus's. But within a day, forensic teams ruled it out, claiming it didn't match his boots. That announcement puzzled many volunteers who'd seen it up close. The print, they said, was too small to belong to an adult, and too recent to be old. Some whispered that it might have been dismissed too quickly. And then came the second claim, one that few knew about at the time. A volunteer reported seeing another footprint, this time much larger, shaped like a boot, found roughly 2 kilometers from the homestead. Police confirmed they examined the area, but they never released their findings publicly. Was it a coincidence, another searcher's footprint, or something far more unsettling? In the days that followed, the official story began to shift. Police described the area as unforgiving, with harsh winds capable of erasing evidence in minutes. They stressed that no indication of foul play had been confirmed. Yet behind closed doors, investigators were already considering another possibility. Could someone have taken Gus? Experts began to weigh in. Criminologists noted how rare it is for a child to vanish completely without leaving any trace, especially within such a small time frame. Theories began to divide the public. One side believed Gus had simply wandered off into the harsh outback. The other suspected a human hand in his disappearance. By the end of the second week, the massive search operation was scaled back. What had started as a rescue mission quietly became a recovery effort. But for the Lamont family, the mission was never over. Each day, Margaret Lamont still walks to the edge of the yard, to the spot where she last saw her grandson, and waits. She says the silence feels heavier now. The sound of the wind, the rustle of the grass, everything reminds her of what was lost that afternoon. Out here, time moves slowly. The days stretch long, the nights longer, and yet despite all the distance, one truth remains close. Somewhere in this red earth lies the answer to what really happened to Gus Lamont.